You work for us! You work for us! Hear our voice! Hear our voice! Hear our voice! Hear our voice!
A chaotic scene at a 2009 town hall for Congresswoman Kathy Castor is one of many protests that unfolded across the country in response to the Affordable Care Act as the Tea Party turned from a grassroots movement into a political juggernaut. But today, we know it wasn't activists alone who fueled that transformation. Groups like Americans for Prosperity, funded by billionaire conservatives Charles and David Koch, amplified the Tea Party through dark money. As writer Jeff Nesbitt wrote in Time magazine in 2016, the Koch brothers have almost certainly spent or raised more than $1 billion to successfully bend one of the two national parties in America to their will. The long rise of the Tea Party movement was orchestrated, well-funded, and deliberate. We're now seeing a similar phenomenon play out in these school board meetings across the country. A leaked letter obtained by the Washington Post shows how a Koch-backed group has fueled opposition to school mask mandates. A new report from the political newsletter Popular Information reveals how local school board issues in Virginia are being weaponized by Koch-backed groups in an attempt to swing the governor's race in Republicans' favor. That piece was written by the founder and editor of Popular Information, Judd Legum, and he joins me now. Judd, it is striking how similar the Tea Party protests of 2009 are to a lot of what we're seeing at these school boards. They have very similar vibes. In some cases, they have the same people involved and the same organizations. What are these organizations? Who funds them? What are they up to?
Well, a lot of that we don't know the answer to, and that's by design. The main organization that you talked about in your intro before the break, Parents Defending Education, was only founded in March of this year. And we won't know, even the limited information that you can learn about a nonprofit like that won't be available for 2+ years. And that's not a mistake. Now, what you can do is you can look at the people involved, and you can look at what their history is. And as we know, the person who's in charge of the Parents Defending Education, which is the primary group operating nationwide, but specifically in Virginia, focusing on the Glenn Youngkin race, has extensive contacts to the Koch organization, really has spent her entire career working for Koch-linked and Koch-funded organizations. So you can put two and two together and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and I want to be clear here. I mean, this is not, this is not some sort of conspiracy, and it's not AstroTurf. It is political. It's what political organizing looks like. I mean, it is, there is some anger on the ground. There's a lot of focus on this in right-wing media. And then these groups come in, particularly in the right, they use dark money more than often than not, to essentially like mold and shape and sustain and cultivate and push this agenda. It is interesting to me that this is where they have landed on school boards, and not just with one issue, but sort of across a variety of different issues.
Well, that's true. Not everyone who is going to these school board meetings is a paid operative. Now, right. Some of them who are appearing on TV and presenting themselves as run-of-the-mill parents are, in fact, paid operatives. Right. That's one thing I learned in the course of this reporting. But there are parents who are genuinely concerned about critical race theory and other issues, whether or not that's accurate. But I think what this is really, and I think that the Tea Party analogy is apt, it's a rebranding of the MAGA movement. It's a lot of the people who were upset about these cultural trends, and it's now repackaging it. And this is right. Especially important in Virginia, where Glenn Youngkin is seeking to mobilize that same constituency of voters without invoking Trump's name and without alienating the conservative voters who might be turned off by Trump. And that's why we see this playing out in Northern Virginia, which is the key battleground for the Virginia governor's race.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that essentially this is like politically useful for this very specific reason, that particularly in the Virginia race, where, again, this has been a key thing that Youngkin's been banging on about. that you don't want to alienate voters with too much Trump, too much MAGA iconography because it's a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points, but you want to marshal that sort of grassroots rage. And so this becomes a convenient way to do it in this new shell. And we're seeing, it becomes essentially a proxy for the Youngkin campaign. We're seeing polling, CBS said that 62% of people said Virginia school curriculum on race and history will be a major factor in how they vote, which I think is a testament to how effective some of this organizing has been.
Yeah, and Youngkin is leaning into this. His main ad, or one of his main ads that's on repeat on cable television, online, is based on an attack that originated out of the school board. He will be appearing tomorrow in Fairfax County to talk about these issues and parents' rights. This is really the closing argument, not only for Youngkin, but for candidates, Republican candidates down the line. They think that this is a winning issue. The point that I was trying to expose, or the issue that I was trying to expose, is that a lot of these issues are contrived in that they don't reflect a real change in the school system. They really reflect a real change in political strategy, whereas a lot of these things were just happening. They were considered nonpartisan. It was just the administration of schools are now being charged and really put under a magnifying glass in a way that is intended to extract maximum political benefit. And that's what we're seeing.
What is really fascinating, I mean, when you look at the McAuliffe line he said about vetoing a bill that around sort of curriculum and books had to do with an LGBTQ book, I believe. And then you've got the sort of critical race theory, moral panic, and then the masking stuff. At some level, it's like there's not really a real conceptual connection between like the masking and the critical race theory. These are distinct issues. One has to do with like public health and the suppression of a viral respiratory infection among children. The other has to do with like very profound and deep political questions about our history. The fact that they've both been the targets sort of tell you something about what's driving this more than like the individual issue itself.
Yeah, and really what's motivated this latest controversy in Virginia are two books. They were actually award-winning books. They do depict some sexually explicit, same-sex sexually explicit material, but they've been around since 2019. They're coming up now, and they're being used as an attack, a false attack on Terry McAuliffe for vetoing a bill he did in 2016. Right. So we're picking whatever issues we can from whatever time period. We're putting them all together, and we're seeing what sticks. They managed to get a soundbite, and that's what's really driving the closing of this Virginia gubernatorial race as we enter into the closing weeks. It's really been remarkable how successful this effort has been.
Judd Legum, great reporting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Coming up, what you need to know about so-called natural immunity, why it isn't an excuse to skip getting vaccinated. That's next.